Gluten-free guests coming to your Thanksgiving, we can wow them with these 2 delicious gluten-free recipes. So I'm showing you how to make a gluten-free gravy, and then we're gonna turn our leftovers into a delicious post-Thanksgiving Day dinner. So let's start with our gravy. This is 3 ingredients, super simple. So even if you're making a traditional one that takes a little bit longer, that's okay. This one is gonna be really quick and really delicious for those at your table who are gluten-free and can't have the flour. So we're using cornstarch instead of flour. You could use a 1-to-1 gluten-free flour if you want in your traditional. Just make sure any potential gravy flavorings that you use, you wanna make sure that they don't have gluten in them so that you don't accidentally have any issues. So I'm just gonna let this melt in our saucepan. This is a 1/4 cup of butter with a 1/4 cup of cornstarch. So that 1-to-1, and we're gonna make that roux, which is just a fat and a flour. All right, adding in that cornstarch. Make sure we get all of it because this is how it's gonna thicken. And it's always nice when you have those ingredients that are naturally gluten-free so that you aren't necessarily having to go out of your way to maybe purchase a substitute, but you can use something that is already in your pantry. Okay, and this is melting up and it's getting nice and gluey. So you can see that's what you want. You don't necessarily want it to be super duper liquidy and brown just yet. We're looking for a nice beige roux. Okay, I'm adding 2 cups of chicken stock. I'm gonna let that come to a boil. And this is really a simple base gravy. If you wanna make it a little bit more interesting and add in some rosemary and sage, add in, a little bit of onion. I love doing a caramelized onion with my gravy. Totally up to you. And now we're just gonna whisk that together. Okay. So in this case, instead of using leftover mashed potatoes, which if you're in my home, there's no such thing as leftover mashed potatoes. That is always gonna get eaten first. So I am using some turkey breast that I already made. We're pretending that is the leftover turkey that you have. And then I have some leftover Brussels sprouts, leftover stuffing, which we have a really delicious gluten-free stuffing recipe on ShopRite.com. So make sure you check that out if you're in need of a stuffing recipe that's gluten-free, because I find even more so than the gravy, that tends to be the one that can be a little tricky. But if you use a gluten-free cornbread mix, it is so good. And then you have a bread option as well as something to use for that breading if you're doing a stuffing gluten-free. So all good all around. All right, so this is really simple. Anytime you make choice baked potatoes, you're gonna cook up your potatoes, and then we're going to take the filling, and that's going to act as our mashed potato. And when you make choice baked potatoes, you don't want to get all the filling out. You want to kind of curve it, and I'll show you in a second. You want to curve it and give yourself a little bit of the edge so that way you can really fill it up. I'll show you in a sec. So you see, I still have that edge going around. So that's going to really give us some weight. We want to create that nice boat for our potato. And you want to have a little bit left over because the filling's only part of it. We don't want to necessarily get rid of it all. So what I like to do is I kind of curve around with my spoon, create that scoop, and then pop it out. And it's okay if you have, like this one, I got a little bit of the hole in there. That's okay. The filling is going to be packed together enough so that we could just fill it back up, and it's not a big deal that you have that in there. And what I really love about this is you could, if you wanted to, when you're making your mashed potatoes, you could very easily make the baked potatoes at the same time. Just throw them in the oven, do them in advance, and then you have them ready to go, because the filling part, when you're scooping it out, you want to do that when they're cool. So it's a great thing to have done in advance. We're going to stick with our 4 we have here. Then I'm going to take some turkey. Now, whether or not you have it sliced, chopped up, however you want to have it, totally up to you. I'm going to do it chopped from the slices because I just think that's going to give us a better bite, because the goal with a twice baked potato is you want to make sure that you are getting all of the goodness in every bite. That's what makes them so delicious. And that's what makes it kind of this nice replacement for our post-Thanksgiving sandwich. All right. So in we go with that. And you could use any vegetables you have left over, Brussels sprouts, you have mushrooms, carrots, green bean casserole, regular green beans, whatever you have is perfect. And then our stuffing. Okay. And then I have some melted butter here that I'm just gonna pour over, and that's just gonna help to get everything mashed together. You can also, if you want, put a cheese in here if you like, maybe like a cranberry goat cheese. If you want to sprinkle that on top to add that element of a baked potato. I'm just gonna top it though with my cranberry sauce to just really keep that going. And then I find it a lot easier to use your hands when it comes to stuffing a potato for a twice baked potato, because again, the filling, you want it to be together. It shouldn't be falling apart. So I just like to kind of mash it together, and you really want to kind of overstuff. That is the point of that potato. And I just think it works so much better if you use your hands. I've made a lot of twice baked potatoes. It's one of my favorite appetizers to make during tailgate season. And I just think it works so well in that veggies as a vehicle to go that direction. All right. So we're stuffing that. Okay, and then you're gonna put them back in the oven for about 10 minutes. You just wanna warm everything through. And this is where if you do put a little bit of Parmesan cheese or a little bit of a nice sharp cheddar on top to just get that crispiness, you can. And then we're gonna take a little spoonful of our cranberry sauce. I'm gonna use my hands again. They're already a little bit dirty anyway. We're gonna pack that on top. And then last but not least, I'm gonna check on my gravy, which has thickened up. And that's gonna finish off our twice baked Thanksgiving potatoes. Want a dessert that'll wow, whether your guests are gluten-free or not? This homemade apple pie is perfect. And we are even gonna make the crust. So I am starting with a gluten-free flour. I like to use something that is 1-to-1 when it comes to substitutions. We have a lot of options in the baking aisle at ShopRite. So choose the one that you like best. We're gonna start with 2 cups of that gluten-free flour, and we're gonna make this all in a food processor rather than by hand. For those of you who are skilled enough at baking that you can do the crust by hand, more power to you, but I am definitely going this route. So 2 cups of gluten-free flour. Then we have a quarter cup plus 2 tablespoons, a quarter cup plus 2 tablespoons of sugar. And then the important part to any sort of pie crust and pastry type dough is the butter. Now you want to put this in the freezer because cold is key when it comes to cooking that pie crust. So that is very, very important. We want to make sure that everything is cold, including our water. I had ice in my water that we're gonna use in here. And so we're cutting up our 2 sticks of butter into little cubes, because the goal here is when we put everything together, we want a little bit of butter in every single bite. So we want to make sure when we pulse it together that it's gonna get all combined, but it's gonna be even throughout. Very important. All right, so putting that in there. Then we have 2 eggs. Do it this way. I always like to crack my eggs into a separate bowl just in case I get a shell in there. I'm notorious for that. So I'd rather know that I'm gonna make a mistake and do it right beforehand. There we go, no shells. Okay, 2 eggs going in there. All right, I'm gonna pulse everything together first before I start adding my cold water, 2 tablespoons at a time. There we go. Now you want to keep knocking it so that way the butter is getting evenly distributed. You saw it was on the top. So we just kind of want to keep banging it to the bottom. So as we pulse, it's getting in there. All right, now I'm gonna pop this off. We're gonna add a little bit of ice water. You wanna do 2 tablespoons at a time because you're really just looking for it to come together where that butter is doing the majority of the work, because that's the flavor we want. All right, So once it is almost combined in the food processor, you can pour it out into a bowl and finish it with your hands. We don't want to over mix. And like I said, you can make this by hand. I just think it's a little bit easier to use the food processor for help first. And it's really nice, even if all year round, maybe making pie crust isn't something that you do, but it's a nice thing to do, I think, especially when you have people who have certain food allergies or intolerances. There's nothing nicer to show that you care than making something special for them. All right, so I am just going to knead this. And like I said, the most important thing is that the butter isn't in clumps. It's okay if it's like little pea size throughout, because when you bake it in your pie tray, it's going to melt out and you'll have a nice buttery crust in there. Okay, so a little bit more flour for dusting, and this will be really good to go. If you don't want to make your own crust from scratch, we have plenty of gluten-free options that you can find in the freezer section at ShopRite, and you can just bake the crust up and get ready for our filling. So for our filling, I'm going to talk you through. We are using Honeycrisp apples. You can use a Macintosh if you want, but I like the flavor of the Honeycrisp, and I like that it maintains its texture a little bit better so that you really get that apple bite. You're gonna wanna peel your apples, core them, and then chop them into 1/4-inch pieces. Most important thing is you want those pieces to be pretty even so that it all cooks evenly in the filling, and you don't have some pieces that are undercooked and some that are overcooked. You're going to add some brown sugar, some apple pie spice, lemon juice, and cornstarch, and that's your filling. Lastly, you are going to do an egg wash on your pie shell. You can do that beforehand so that you get that browning. And if you want to, if it is a double shell, like for this, you can be a little bit fancy. You can cut this into strips, and you can do that kind of lattice. You can have the kids make maybe some turkey handprints if you want. You can have a lot of fun with it. You can certainly do that with your homemade dough as well, but it's just a fun way if you want to put a topper on that pie to get something a little bit more festive. So then you're just gonna bake this at 375 until it is warm and bubbling through. Top it with some whipped cream, and you have a delicious gluten-free Honeycrisp apple pie. Like and follow for more.